As many?
Should be another government member.
Go ahead.
Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, I rise on behalf of the great people of Long Island. And Madam Speaker, I'm honored to yet again rise in this place to represent their interests. Madam Speaker, the bills in question today, particularly those that relate to Civil Aviation Authority, Bahamas, they're merely being amended. I do not believe the bills themselves are controversial at all. And I believe that the bills lend to the protection of the aviation industry. I hope it would, that as we move forward, we would look to expand the aircraft registry in the Bahamas, much in the way that we have a pretty large ship registry in the Bahamas. Madam Speaker, for the most part, as I said earlier, some mere amendments. Madam Speaker, I do believe, though, that we should look at establishing in future independent ministry to deal with regulations or regulatory agencies, like the Civil Aviation Authority, where this would avoid ministry conflicts. For example, say, for example, there's a ministry, the regulators attached to that ministry, and then an entity that the regulator oversees or regulates is also attached to that industry. So I think it would be good in future, maybe a future ministry, to see we don't have any rails, so air, transport, maritime, maybe all merged together. So, and then of course maybe another ministry where a grouping of sister authorities, like the authorities that govern air transport, et cetera, et cetera. Madam Speaker, I've heard a lot here today about runways and inspection of runways and so on and so forth. And I know what it is to have a runway that is not in the best condition as the one in my constituency. And I'm hopeful that as we progress, that the runway in my constituency would be, Deadmanski. Stella Myers, as you would be aware, Angleton, had some works done, I think during it might have been your first term as transport minister. Stella Myers is still holding pretty good. It was pretty smooth. The only issue with Stella Morris would be that if it was longer, you could get larger aircraft coming in. But in terms of Deadmanski is too short. The runway is really gritty and not in the best condition. And in addition to the terminal needing work, and I'm going to come to that, the runway itself is not in the best condition. When you land, if you've been to Long Island, Madam Speaker, in Bahamas here, and I'm sure my good friend from Exuma can speak to this, when they come down, I don't know, they have to start holding that plane together immediately. The member for Tall Pine, which I consider Pinewood. My brother over there from Pinewood and I sat on the side of each other going to the regatta. And when the plane came down Bahamas Air, both of us were kind of holding on to that seat as we were pressing brake. When you drive, you pressing your own brakes. So the runway is too short and the condition is not good. You could actually feel everything. And I don't think there's anyone who would deny that. Madam Speaker, so maintenance of these runways and airports, we certainly would like to see greater maintenance going forward. I do support increasing the autonomy of CAB. I think that is what this bill seeks to provide, making it a bit more independent from other government agencies, authorities, or influence. You know, as we all know, Madam Speaker, expanding the inspection authority of air operators, aircraft operators, is urgently needed. I've seen at least 2 videos in recent time, 2 separate videos, over the last few months, of a plane door flying open, or the last one was the emergency hatch flying open during flight. Yes.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exeter.
There were some erroneous information posted in relation to an airline and the emergency door flying open, etc. That was determined not to be correct. The matter was investigated, and it occurred that the emergency door was open on the ground by a passenger. So that was erroneous, and I think sometimes to protect the integrity of the traveling public, the integrity of these airlines serving the traveling public, I invite the media to be more discerning about what they carry, what they pick up from social media, and carry without confirmation from the relevant authority or for giving the airline itself a call to say, hey, tell me what happened. So I think there's some level of irresponsible reporting built into this, and I wouldn't want to put that on the record of the House, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member.
Thank you, Exuma, for that clarification. So, in this instance, the emergency hatch was opened by a passenger on the ground. However, there was another instance, and I believe this one was actually true, where the plane door opened mid-flight, which is really unacceptable and entirely ridiculous. Speaker, we all know, well, those of us who have an understanding of, or who do some research, you know, the engines of planes, there's so much hours that they can run for before you have to take them in to maintenance. And those responsible operators usually fly their planes to the States. I know people like Joel Fries and Marty Fox and those out of Long Island. They fly to the States and they put their planes in maintenance a week, 2 weeks, get the engines upgraded, changed, etc. So, you know, ensuring that aircraft operators are constantly updating and maintaining the aircraft before having persons come on board, I think this bill could lend to that. I'm hopeful of that because we have seen a lot of slackness. We've seen a lot of slackness. We often hear about planes coming from there's one particular island, Madam Speaker, where, you know, there's a running joke that even children fly. And you know the island I'm talking about. You know, Madam Speaker, I do think that there's a need for updating of some licenses. I was told recently, over the last week or two, by a pilot, that there are some operators in the Bahamas who have private pilot's licenses, but they are charging and flying people across the islands without having been rated to operate as commercial pilots. You know? So if you have a private pilot's license, you can fly yourself and your family and your friends, but you cannot fly people, charge them, and run a commercial operation. That is something that has to be tightened on, and there's a number of persons doing that out there. There's a need for more random checks. So, Madam Speaker, I believe that we should move towards establishing, as we set up legislation like this, establishing an aviation think tank, which would be needed to review tariffs and fees and the impact of these fees on consumers, because every time I look around, tickets going up and up and up. You know, I could go to Florida cheaper than I could go home to Long Island. That's ridiculous. And it's right in the Bahamas. For me to go home, I have to pay $300. I can go to Florida for less than that. We have to do something about inter-island travel and the cost to travel within our country, particularly by air, because the prices are ridiculous. They're getting out of hand. Soon enough, at this rate, because I think it's been increasing now for the last few years. If it gets to $400 or $500, that's almost a flight to the UK. You know? Almost. That's right. An economy.
Not the way it says.
You know? An economy, the way the average man travels. And so, Madam Speaker, you know, there's some pilots who tell me about how they move around the Bahamas. You know, tell me, say, man, you know, we move like bats in the air, right? Say, we call, say, for example, you call the member for Exuma. Hey, man, I'm at this location. You give your coordinates. He gives his coordinates. They send out something and say, hey, where are you at the moment? You know, they pinging off each other. You know, this is what pilots actually tell me how they fly around at a certain height in this country, particularly when you get further south, because I think air traffic control in Nassau only extends to a certain point. Once you move further down, you know, you have to be pinging off the different towers and pinging off the different airlines who are flying around you at the same or similar altitude. Madam Speaker, when it comes to as relates to overflight fees, how much do we get? What are we doing with those fees? You know, I heard that international airlines are complaining about paying fees to us when we purportedly pay none to the US government, who continues to handle our airspace about 5,000 feet. Don't get me wrong, Madam Speaker. 6,000 feet. Don't get me wrong, Madam Speaker. I don't think that's any of their business. And they should pay to use our airspace. However, given that we are not paying the US side to monitor our airspace, and they are instead sending funds to us, how much are we getting every year? And what are we doing with those funds? Have we ever thought to set up a special purpose vehicle for funds obtained from overflight fees for the development of the industry? Maybe a percentage to be allocated to education or cultural initiatives, etc. I've always seen the consolidated fund as a bit of a black hole where you collect all this money from all these different islands, all these different agencies, and then we dump all the fees and taxes into one pot. I'm speaking even at law firms. We have different accounts for different things. You have your client account, your operating account, and your different accounts for various outgoings and incomings. And so I think perhaps we should look at how we can best effect constitutional change to better the current situation. Because as I said, the consolidated fund is a black hole. Madam Speaker, you know, for me, for us in Long Island, the airport has been a sore point for some time. We desperately need airlift into the island. The airport has hindered, or the lack of a decent first world international airport where we could receive direct flights from the US and the UK and elsewhere, has hindered our progress, our development, has stymied our economic growth. And we see every year Long Islanders, they graduate, they depart, they go to college, they move to Nassau, and some of them never come back. They may come for a regatta or Christmas, but they never come back because, you know, there are very little opportunities on the island. And some of that has to do with the lack of that airport, which could really stimulate the economy and jumpstart the economic engine in ways that we have not yet seen. We are industrious people, Madam Speaker, but industrious people need help as well. And we can get that airport. That will put us on a path towards higher heights, you know, towards achieving some of the success that we see in the Exumas and Eleuthris and Abaco. You know, so we're hopeful, Exuma, that we're able to get that airport and what that airport means for us. Madam Speaker, you know, I have a special affinity for Bahamas Air. Firstly, I want to commend Tanya Pratt. Tanya's a friend, the chairwoman of Bahamas Air, and also Tracy Cooper, And over the years, I found him to be quite accommodating. I want to see Bahamas Air expand its routes. We have the capacity, the ability to do so. I want to see us expand to more international markets. Right now, Bahamas Air, and I say this without fail or favor, Bahamas Air is the leading regional airline, number one. Okay? And I think there's been rating of regional airlines, and we've beaten out Caribbean Airlines as well. And Caribbean Airlines is pretty good, but we've beaten them out on a number of occasions. But greater regional connectivity between the Bahamas and other countries within the Caribbean would be welcome, and I think we could use Bahamas Air to help facilitate that, to make that happen. Madam Speaker, I grew up loving Bahamas Air. I'm a huge fan of it. So whenever and wherever I travel, I always choose them first. There's no greater comfort than when you're aboard a Bahamas Air flight. You got a sense of pride, national pride, but also you're comfortable knowing their superb safety record, which is perhaps one of the best in the world. And so, we all know that Bahamas Air has well-trained, highly experienced, excellent pilots. They don't just fly here, Madam Speaker. They live here. So they have a greater sense of responsibility to us, because as we say, there's one of we. Madam Speaker, I think it was this morning, or last night or this morning, I read a report that RBC was increasing bank fees. How these banks lost their minds? Every time you look around, they are trying to extract more and more and more from the Bahamian consumer. How much of this can the public take? And when will the government step in and move to put a stop to this? I just read an article, Madam Speaker, which stated, and I want to quote the article, it said, Royal Bank of Canada has informed its customers that starting July 31st, a fee of 50 cents will be applied per decline transaction for other bank ATM transactions within the country and purchases at points of sale. So watch this now, Madam Speaker. Let me be clear. And this is from their own notice. The bank, that's RBC, they are telling Bahamian consumers, that if you have insufficient funds in your account, they can charge you. Although they can see you don't have nothing there. So you have nothing there, and they're charging you 50 cents for having nothing there. Imagine that. And then, watch this part, Madam Speaker. If you go into McDonald's or Wendy's or Bamboo Shack, Madam Speaker, you look like you eat at some Greek restaurants, though. But if you were to go, Madam Speaker, and make any point of sale purchase for whatever, and you put in the wrong PIN, right, in your debit card, Madam Speaker, let's say you put in the wrong PIN and your card declined as a result of that. You go to BAF, go to pay your insurance, and you put in a 6, and you're supposed to put in a 9. You know they sometimes scramble the numbers on the credit card, on the card machine anyway. If you miss and do that, Madam Speaker, and it declines, they charge you 50 cents for that. That is ludicrous and unacceptable. Unacceptable. The same applies, Madam Speaker, if a Bahamian is making a point of sale purchase, making online purchases at Amazon or one of those places, and somehow you end up going over your daily limit. I think some banks have a daily limit of $2,500 a day or $3,500 a day. Some are $1,500. If you go over that daily limit, so let's say, Madam Speaker, your daily limit is $1,500. You buy something and everything comes up to $1,550, right? You're going to be charged 50 cents for going over your daily limit. How can this foolishness possibly be allowed? I call upon the central bank to intervene. Just this past March, the central bank released its analysis of commercial bank fees, and it showed that there were varying and different costs per bank for deposit accounts, credit card transactions, digital transactions, and so on. The central bank must put caps on these fees. The central bank must cause banks to remove certain fees. The central bank must better regulate these practices where banks are popping up with random fees to extract more and more money from our people. At some point, Madam Speaker, it must be realized that you cannot overwhelm people's finances and that you simply cannot get blood from stone. Now, Madam Speaker, I want to pivot here a bit. I saw a news clip with the member for South, Andrews and Mangrove Key, talking about reverse osmosis plants procured by WSC on Monday. I was not present when he spoke. I found his comments almost laughable and most disappointing. He misled the House, Madam Speaker, and one wonders if this was done intentionally. This is a member, Madam Speaker, that I often talk sports with, who could have simply asked me a question and I would have assisted with it. And so I was, and who I've recently heard make very personal and crass comments from his seat. Madam Speaker, let me speak to this. I heard talk about investigations, which I welcome. Madam Speaker, while people on islands like Eleuthera can't bathe, can't wash their dishes, the member's time to come in here and go on the attack. He's attacking the wrong people, and he should focus on the solution. Fix the problem that he's been elected to resolve. No one wants to hear stories where people now elected are being stuck in a time capsule. Madam Speaker, when the former government determined that we would seek to secure our water resources and seek to no longer be exploited by foreign companies who bring in used RO machines, pull water from our well fields, make WSC pay for the electricity and the consumables, and so on under poorly drawn 25-year contracts that we observe were expiring, certain decisions were taken. We went to Cabinet and made a presentation to Cabinet. And everyone was at the Cabinet, as we presented there, we were accompanied by the board, general manager, persons like John Boleg, and other members of the technical team. And I'm happy to provide that presentation to the member for South Andrews and Mangrove Key. Madam Speaker, WSC also went into the marketplace, pursuing the government's policy at the time. The government sought, firstly though, to purchase contracts, the contracts currently in operation, from the company Aqua Design. However, to be frank, they were greedy and they saw a price per plant, some $1 million or so, per plant, that was much more than it should have cost. And these were machines that are 20 and 25 years old. And Madam Speaker, I'll table that quote. I undertake to do so, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, meetings were held with a number of foreign companies and operators to, one, see how build, own, operate, and transfer contracts could be arranged in future, including with Aqua Design. And two, purchase RO plants at concessionary rates. Interestingly, Madam Speaker, many of the persons involved in those talks have either been retired or recruited by the very companies that WSC was seeking to get out from under. In fact, Madam Speaker, WSC on one occasion issued requests for proposals for various plants. I heard the member here talking about a no-bid contracts. That's not true. Mr. Adrian Gibson, who's now the Deputy General Manager, who at the time had oversight of the Family Island operations, can speak to that, as he knows of it and drew many of the proposals. Madam Speaker, to my knowledge, in seeking to obtain and meet this policy position that the government put to us, which was then also agreed by WSC's board, WSC, and I've seen the meeting minutes, I was not in those meetings, met with Suez and Aqua Design. Well, Suez was at the time the parent company of Aqua Design. I think it's now owned by Viola. And they met with a company out of France called Fluence. They met with a Danish company called Accept, whose local representative was Mr. Philip, or is Mr. Philip Whitehead. They met with Mr. David Hawker, who is the owner of Watermakers. was a long-time supplier of water for WSC and the owner of the Saniel Key Yacht Club and makers there. They met with Forever Pure. They met with a company called Advanced. They met with a company called Water and Power. And Madam Speaker, proposals were gotten from many of them. I was doing some looking around today to find some of those proposals, Madam Speaker. I've been able to put my hands on a few. And so, Madam Speaker, I undertake to also table those. Madam Speaker, my advice was, at the time, I was advised that all these companies had different approaches to what was to be obtained and different price points. In fact, a number of them I know had submitted proposals to WSC. As it relates to the reverse osmosis position that was taken by the government, that was supported by various reports from the Water and Sewage Corporation. There was a report by Ms. Diane Saunders that we will table, Mr. John Boleg, we will table, a consultant, an international consultant by the name of Mr. Nikolay Vuchkov. I think he's now working in Saudi Arabia, that I will table. Anthony Boswick wrote a report that I will table. So did Mr. Philip Benaby, and I will also table that. And then there were various other proposals. Madam Speaker, secondly, I'm well aware that before we left office, 5 reverse osmosis plants, at least 5, were delivered. One was installed in Saudi Lutra at the Waterford site. One was installed and operational in Moores Island. It was operational. That was when that contract ended with Aqua Design. That was overtaken. WSC runs that. That came off WSC's books. WSC owns that plant now in Moores Island. One was installed for operations in Inagua. What is most interesting, though, is I have been reliably informed that the member for South Andrews and Mangrove Key has had this plant in Inagua uprooted, and I am told shipped to Andrews. One was also installed for operations in San Salvador. One was installed for operations in Long Island. It was visited by myself and the then Prime Minister and former Deputy Prime Minister and many of the WSC technical team and leaders. To my knowledge, Madam Speaker, that was to go online when we demitted office, or when we were booted out of office, if you want to say it that way. Madam Speaker, 2 reserve plants were also left at the site of the New Providence operation. One was acquired from Water Makers. I think that was 100,000 gallons, and that was a plant that was set to be moved around the country in the instance that a hurricane came and damaged some installation. You could take that plant and drop that anywhere on the affected island, put it immediately into operation, and people could get water. And then there was a second plant that was obtained from the very company that the state minister derided. And Madam Speaker, I saw the clip. I was informed today by the persons who did the installations that the electrical side had not been installed, and it was supposed to be installed in all these plants when we got out of office. However, I understand that those works were stopped upon this government being elected. So when I hear the members saying that the plants are not working, how would he know? What does he mean they weren't working? Madam Speaker, I cannot speak for the relationship with the relationship with the manufacturer became after we were booted from office. I also cannot speak about whether those who came after were negligent in their duties to follow up and liaise with any party who WSC executed contracts with. But once the bell rang, Madam Speaker, I cleared my office, and the member for Fort Charlotte to tell you that I would have told him, and I had a conversation that my office was long cleared. Madam Speaker, once we lost, I put WSC in the rear view and sought to get on with private practice. Alas, that was not to be. So, Madam Speaker, to say that some monies was spent and paid to a manufacturer and nothing was delivered is simply untrue. You do not just call big numbers to trigger Bahamians. Bahamians are not that gullible and easy to manipulate. Madam Speaker, the former government had a plan to take over and run the reverse osmosis plants once those contracts expired. freeing itself of the likes of Aqua Design and others, freeing the Bahamian people, such as the people of Eleuthera, from being subjected to threats to shut off their water and other threats to disconnect water supply from the source for some small balance. To do so, Madam Speaker, a unit was tasked with forming the RO position, which Mr. Bostwick contributed to, with the operations of the RO machines, and with the administration of existing RO contracts. A number of engineers were recruited specifically for this unit, in addition to external technical consultants, such as Mr. Nikolay Wuchkov and Anton, I can't remember Anton's last name. But it had a hydrologist among the members, other technical folks, and liaised closely with other WSC departments and teams in an effort to pursue and achieve its mandate. So, Madam Speaker, I recall the last government giving short-term and 6-month extensions to allow WSC teams to get to the point of completing their installation and testing of these plants. And one of the hiccups was that Aqua Design, Madam Speaker, get this piece, Madam Speaker, Aqua Design wanted to sell water and sewage to wells that were drilled on WSC land. Imagine that. And so, are you impugning the character of persons such as members who were in the RO unit and technical leaders like Ricky Roll and those who installed these plants? These are people who inspected, installed, and tested these plants. In fact, there's a young man, but a young engineer, Michael Cooper, who spent time in the States being trained by the same manufacturer who was spoken of. He was trained to build the plants. And guess what, Madam Speaker? Aqua Design snatched him from water and sewage. Michael Cooper was in the States with an immersion course. And then there was Sweeting Ski, Madam Speaker. That plant was purchased by Water and Sewage, upgraded, and Water and Sewage took over the operations there, hired the operator that was used by the previous person or previous operator. And I believe she's still on Water and Sewage staff. Madam Speaker, the company.
The chair recognizes
What's the point of order?
the honorable member for South and Central Andros.
Yes, Madam Speaker. I just need clarification from the member. He said that I misled the House, but he did not speak about the specific plants that were purchased from Pure, the company out of California. He didn't speak specifically to that. He spoke about the cabinet presentation, about the reverse osmosis, switching to it. That's fine. But we needed him to speak specifically to what I spoke about, what he spoke about earlier that morning, the plants, what were purchased from the company in California. Thank you.
Madam Speaker,
Thank you, honorable member.
Madam Speaker, I believe I did just that. In fact, Madam Speaker, I stated that a number of companies had submitted proposals, and this entity, Forever Pure, is one such entity that submitted a proposal, right? And I undertake, Madam Speaker, to table that as well. I want to lay all this. Madam Speaker, this entity, so there were plants purchased from water makers as well as this company. We left, Madam Speaker.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for South and Central Andros.
Spoke specifically about these plants that were purchased from that company, and he still hasn't said what I misled the House about. I said that we got plants and we still paid deposits for 2, and we did not get them up until the point when he said they demitted office. But to that point, the corporation still can't get in contact with this company. He said this company provided a proposal in order to run stations. The company only provided the equipment to water and sewage. So if he has direct contact with this company, which in the corporation has only one set of contacts and it's not working, he could provide it. He could lay that for the House also. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable member.
Madam Speaker, that's cute, but don't you dare. Let me say this, Madam Speaker. This company, I don't know these people. That's the first thing. Secondly, Madam Speaker, I never said in this place, and this is where he's misled, I never said in this place that that company offered a proposal to run any plant for water and sewage. I said that they offered a proposal for water and sewage to purchase plants from them, which is water and sewage, which is what, my brother, you should have listened. You should have listened. You should do a better job at listening. Water and sewage purchase plants from them as well as water makers. That is what I said, Madam Speaker. When we left office, Madam Speaker, water and sewage had already received, I think I listed them, about 5 or 6 plants, which were installed, some of them, and some of them were at New Providence operations.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for South.
You have to state your point of
What
order.
I don't want the member for Long Island to do is mislead the House by not speaking about the 2 plants that we paid deposits for. I want to know his knowledge on that. He could sign. Yes.
Madam Speaker, I'm going to respond to him. Firstly, Madam Speaker, I'm not involved in the technical side of this. Secondly, Madam Speaker, I am aware that a number of plants were ordered from this company as well as the other company. Some were delivered when I demitted office. I cannot speak to what happened after I demitted. Some were, I think 2 or 3 were on order, but I can only speak to what was delivered and what I know of during my tenure. What I can say, Madam Speaker, what I can say is I do know that there were plants ordered by the Water and Sewage Corporation, and some of the Water and Sewage Corporation was waiting to take delivery on 1 or 2 of them at the time that we demitted office. I can speak to nothing else that happened after we demitted office. Okay? And Madam Speaker, I want to note, Madam Speaker, and I hear this member talking about, and by the way, we went through an extensive process, Madam Speaker. I'm going to wrap up right now, Madam Speaker. I'm going to wrap up. We went through an extensive recruitment process, Madam Speaker, to get personnel and engineers with RO experience and engage an internationally renowned consultant to meet the government's mandate. And Madam Speaker, I hear this member here talking about using threats with investigations and so on.
Which member?
The member for South Andres and Mangrove Key. He is free to do that. He's free to do that, Madam Speaker. He's free to do that. You know? But I want to say something, Madam Speaker. I have no...
The chair recognizes the honorable member for South and Central Andros.
Spoke about the presentation made to Cabinet. I just wanted to know if these purchases made to this company was passed through Cabinet or whether it was passed through the board. So he could speak on that. He was there when it was first signed. So he could speak on that to see where the authorization for the purchases came.
Thank you, honorable member.
Madam Speaker, I thought it was, I don't know if it was question time, but I'll answer him. Madam Speaker, firstly, these purchases were approved by the board, and the government did approve the purchases. Okay? We did get approval from the government to make these purchases. Excuse me, you do not, excuse me, Madam Speaker, I'd like to be able to finish my contribution, Madam Speaker.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for South and Central.
Madam Speaker, I just need clarification for the public. He said the government. I wanted to know if it was the Cabinet, where we would have a Cabinet conclusion. He's laying a lot of papers. I could lay that for him. And the board has papers also that he could come and lay with this conclusion on these purchases from this company in California. So I just want him to state on record that, yes, this was something done by the board, and also it passed through Cabinet. So then he could come and lay those papers for us.
Which cabinet?
Former Cabinet.
Well, former cabinet, okay.
Madam Speaker, firstly, as I indicated, the government, the Prime Minister at the time, former minister, they're well aware. We made a presentation to the Cabinet. I would not have a Cabinet paper. I don't sit in Cabinet. But I can tell you, Madam Speaker, that the board certainly approved of it. Okay? The board certainly approved of it. And Madam Speaker, all of these purchases, Madam Speaker, this member's not even allowing me to answer his own question.
Chair recognizes the honorable member for South.
I just want to put on the record that this member is stating that a $1.9 million purchase was just authorized by the board and not by Cabinet. Is that what we're hearing from you today?
Madam Speaker, firstly, let me establish that the Water and Sewage Corporation Act does not apply any limit to to our board, firstly. Secondly, Madam Speaker, as I stated to the member, the government of the Bahamas at the time, and the Prime Minister and the then Deputy could probably speak more to it, would have given authorization for this to be done. I am happy to table any information that I have concerning it. I can also say, Madam Speaker, that the board of the Water and Sewage Corporation would have approved and supported the position. And Madam Speaker, let me be clear. I cannot speak to this 1.9 million that he's talking about. I know that these plants were purchased individually over a period of time, and there were different proposals, There were different proposals, Madam Speaker, there were different proposals received from multiple companies with respect to these plants. Multiple companies.
What kind of plants are we talking about?
These are reverse osmosis plants, Madam Speaker.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, reverse osmosis plants. And so, Madam Speaker, as I said earlier, the members, I heard him in here talking about investigations. He's free to do that. He's free to do that, Madam Speaker. We often hear threats coming from that side about investigations and seeking to criminalize people who otherwise have no criminal records. Even targeting one's family, Madam Speaker. We note that the Registrar General bill is soon to be tabled. And I know myself and the opposition on that occasion will tell a personal story about victimization and blatant attempts to injure and destroy my family. We are going to publicly address that in short order, and we hope that the Attorney General will be here then. Madam Speaker, he knows of what I speak. Madam Speaker, Long Island supports the amendments. And Madam Speaker, I'm happy to bring clarification to what this member said, and I am prepared, Madam Speaker, as I said, I undertake to table that which I have stated here today. I will do so at the next sitting of the House, because unfortunately I don't have all of the documents here with me today due to a printing mishap. So at the next sitting, Madam Speaker, I shall do so.
Thank you,
Madam
Honourable
Speaker.
Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for South and Central Andhra.
Madam Speaker, just so the public is not misled, the only limit that the board has, according to their corporate governance, what was approved in the 2007 to 2012 Hubert Ingram's government, is for 250,000, Madam Speaker. Or anything over that, 250,000, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Yes. Madam Speaker, the Water and Sewage Corporation is governed by an act. Okay? The Interpretation and General Clauses Act is clear. He could read one with the other. Right? That is not in the Water and Sewage Corporation Act. And I suggest that you get yourself a copy of the act and read it. Section 7, I think it is, or Section 6 and 7. Get a copy of the act.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Asmini?